Bring in show music, please.
This is Squawk Pod, and I'm CNBC producer Cameron Costa. On today's episode,
billions and billions of dollars in waste, fraud, and abuse.
President Trump and Elon Musk together in the Oval Office, presenting a DOGE defense.
The reason the press exists is for things like this. I just wish it was applied evenly.
And an extended interview with Palantir co-founder Joe Lonsdale, how he's thinking about the DOGE agenda.
And this is more, I guess, of a tech world way than a DC way.
But is that the right way to go about change? Lonsdale says it's better than the alternative.
It's such a mess that I think being bold is the right answer. I get it's going to have a few mistakes, but I'd rather have those few mistakes and fix it.
Plus, DEI rollbacks at Goldman Sachs and at Disney. And tariffs, it's a big American auto story with CNBC's Phil LeBeau.
We are big people who want big automobiles.
It's Wednesday, February 12th, and Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue it, please.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We're live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick, along with Joe Kernen and Andrew Ross Sorkin. It's snowy out. We made it in. It's okay. Things are easing down a little bit. Only a couple of inches here and north of here. Down in Washington, D.C., almost 6 inches. So the snow is impacting things on the Northeast here today.
It's been snowy this year, but we haven't had
snow like this in a while.
We haven't had a foot and a half.
Use it.
Though,
Not in Boston. Boston is having a snow
DC
drought. D.C. we had about almost 6 inches.
Yeah,
so we're watching that pretty closely. There's Times Square. Nice picture of things. It's warm and cozy inside, though. And the U.S. equity futures this morning.
First up today, data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics sent futures this morning tanking. The Consumer Price Index, a measure of costs of goods and services across the American economy, rose 0.5 percentage point in January. That's higher than economists expected, and it's the highest monthly increase since August of 2023. The annual inflation rate now sits at 3%. Without food and energy prices, which are more volatile components of the metric, CPI rose 0.4%. And for the record, when I say food prices were volatile in 2025, I mean it. Egg prices surged over 15% last month and over 53% for the last year. Now, this all comes after Fed Chair Jay Powell indicated on Tuesday that interest rates will remain on hold, at least for a little while.
With our policy stance now significantly less restrictive than it had been, and the economy remaining strong, we do not need to be in a hurry to adjust our policy stance.
It's a complicated picture for the Fed. Recovery from high inflation has been uneven, but some say if the labor market remains solid, the Fed won't institute any more policy changes until inflation ticks down substantially. Let's get to the rest of today's headlines.
So let's talk about the guy who's in charge. Well, he's not technically in charge of cutting things. He's technically in charge of finding the things to cut. President Trump signing executive orders in the Oval Office yesterday, and he was accompanied by Elon Musk and his son. Imagine you've seen the pictures, if not the video. President directing agencies to work with Musk's DOGE department to slash their workforces and limit hiring to essential positions, according to the White House fact sheet. Agencies are going to be permitted to hire no more than 1 employee for every 4 workers leaving the government. That's with exceptions made for law enforcement, national security, immigration, and public safety roles. Now, Trump and Musk spoke to reporters about the cuts to government.
Billions and billions of dollars in waste, fraud, and abuse. And I think it's very important. And that's one of the reasons I got elected. I said, we're going to do that. Nobody had any idea it was that bad, that sick, and that corrupt. And it seems hard to believe that judges want to try and stop us from looking for corruption, especially when we found hundreds of millions of dollars worth, much more than that, in just a short period of time.
It's not optional for us to reduce the federal expenses. It's essential. It's essential for America to remain solvent as a country. And it's essential for America to have the resources necessary to provide things to its citizens and not simply be servicing vast amounts of debt.
Two men also spoke about transparency and accountability. They were asked about Musk's DOGE department.
All of our actions are fully public. So if you see anything, you say like, wait a second, hey, Elon, that seems like maybe that's, there's a conflict there. It's not like people are going to be shy about saying that. Transparency is what builds trust, not simply somebody asserting trust. So not somebody saying they're trustworthy, but transparency, so you can see everything that's going on. And then you can see, am I doing something that benefits one of my companies or not? It's totally obvious.
And if we thought that, we would not let him do that segment or look in that area if we thought there was a lack of transparency or a conflict of interest. And we watched that also.
Also talked about how he said, look, I'm going to make mistakes. I don't know if you saw that part of the interview. He said nobody bats 1,000, but it was asked in the context of something that actually then went viral. And I think this goes to the questions about social media and everything else. Where
I didn't think it did. The condoms?
Well, what was interesting?
Because I agreed with him that number one, I have no idea what $50 million worth of condoms looks like.
Well, they figured out per person what it was.
That's a big number. So it didn't go to Gaza, it went to Mozambique. But I thought that the core finding was what are we sending $50 million worth of condoms anywhere for? And I guess HIV. Was that what it was?
It was for HIV in Mozambique, but it wasn't
for bombs.
It wasn't saying to Hamas.
No.
But I'm saying we can debate whether they should be sending them or not. That's a different question.
But it's a lot. 50. I just can't imagine what
I'm not.
Truck.
I'm not here to defend the total
number.
It's
a lot of condoms.
I'm just suggesting that when somebody of his influence says something that is as factually, because it was originally put in the context of
bombs
of Gaza,
right.
of Gaza in Palestine. It was in the context of Hamas. It was in the context of Israel. By the way, it created all sorts of rumors and speculation that the United States was trying to control the population of the Palestinians. By the way, that's what happened as a result of all this. And so when you get things that are that incendiary and that wrong in the social media space, even if you ultimately 2 or 3 days later, or even 10 hours later, land up in the community notes.
It doesn't shut off.
It doesn't shut off the sort of fire hose of wrongness.
But this is the world we live in, and we've seen conspiracy theories that are crazy, and we've seen conspiracy theories that eventually came true.
What they said yesterday in the Oval Office was so sound, it's hard to disagree with anything that they were saying. I wish that was the level of discourse that was there all the time. Elon's right. If you disagree with them, you bring it up. But
I think that's what they're trying for.
But sometimes when you disagree and you bring it up, you get called an idiot immediately. Right. If this were a more civilized discourse all the time like that, then of course this is exactly what we should be doing.
Well, it's a work in progress. I noticed that.
I'd also just say one other thing about this. Most of the stuff that we're finding out about DOGE and what they're doing, we're finding out because reporters, journalists are actually doing the work. That's how this was found out. That's
the Mozambique thing.
Yeah. But there's lots of examples of what's been happening inside DOGE that's happened as a result of journalists. At the same time that those journalists, I'm sorry to say, have been targeted in some cases either by the administration or by Musk himself. And so that to me, and I feel totally comfortable saying this. That's a problem.
It's a civilized discourse. If you could have civilized discourse and transparency where this was exactly what was happening, that's great. What they said yesterday, I don't disagree with any of it.
I think that that's what the reason the press exists is for things like this. I just wish it was applied evenly. And that the press hadn't taken 4 years off. I've said that again and again. But I do think the press needs the media needs to pace themselves. It's going to be 4 years. I mean, their heads are going to explode. I liked X's coat, is what I thought. It was like a little man's like trench coat.
And his hair kind of combed over.
But he's like, if that had been me, I remember sort of what I was like back then when, like I told you, when I'd be hearing President Kennedy and it's like,
that's what I was going to say.
Who is this guy and why is he boring me with this? Yeah. He's in the Oval Office with the President of the United States and the richest man in the world. He's like, these guys are just so
boring.
Will they ever shut up? When can I go?
When he's sitting on the ground.
Right, and he's digging for gold.
It's like JFK Jr. pictures under the desk.
But it was, exactly.
Yeah.
But it was kind of, I happened to be watching the whole thing, and it's pretty, learned a lot.
Goldman Sachs is abandoning its DEI pledge that it made back in 2020. You might remember that it would only take a company public if it included 2 diverse board members one of whom must be a woman. A spokesperson saying the decision was the result of legal developments related to board diversity requirements. A similar rule for listings on NASDAQ's U.S. exchange struck down by a federal appeals court in December. And I remember we talked a lot to David Solomon about that decision at the time in Davos at one point, I think, and then also a bunch of other times as well.
Separately, Disney is making changes to its DEI program. Axios reports that the company is moving and changing some of its content disclaimers. Back in 2020, it started running those disclaimers around certain titles like Peter Pan and Dumbo that said, "This program includes negative depictions and/or mistreatment of people or cultures." The new shortened advisory notes will be moved to the details section and will instead read, "This program is presented as originally created and may contain stereotypes or negative depictions." Disney's also getting rid of its controversial Reimagine Tomorrow initiative and the corresponding website. And it's replacing the diversity and inclusion performance factor that it used to evaluate executive compensation with what it's calling a new talent strategy. And the public broadcasting service, known as PBS, is shutting down its DEI office to comply with President Trump's executive order. The company's director of DEI and senior vice president of DEI are leaving the company. The network CEO said PBS will remain a welcoming place, in their words, for everyone.
And JPMorgan Chase workers calling on CEO Jamie Dimon to retain the bank's hybrid work model and reverse its decision to bring employees back to the office 5 days a week. That return to work mandate set to take effect early next month. The workers have launched a publicly visible petition that calls for better working conditions and argues to not only keep the hybrid model, but to expand it.
Good luck with that.
Slackers.
Look, we've known for a long time workers have had the upper hand for a while. Yeah. If you swing back to a situation where there are fewer jobs to be had, then you may lose some of that leverage. Although Citibank has gone out of its way to kind of say that it is going to continue to do that, right. And it may be a way to hire away some of the talent.
They didn't spend $1 billion to build a gorgeous new building on Park Avenue that they need to fill.
So I say, good luck with that.
I'm willing to talk about the 4-day thing.
Yeah.
Okay. For us?
We can have that discussion.
We can have that discussion.
For everybody. We can have that discussion.
For everybody.
I'm not talking 3, talking 4.
4?
Talking 4. Not going crazy.
Here's the question.
Not going nuts.
I know we got to go, and they're going to say this is frivolous. If you could
How is this frivolous?
If you could pick one day.
Yeah.
Monday or Friday?
Is it Monday or Friday, or is it Wednesday?
Right. That's interesting.
I'd have to think about it because other times I've thought I'd like to pay my dues the first week and then have the Monday off. Other times I'm thinking I really like, but Fridays are my favorite days anyway, even though we have work. So maybe the Monday, then there wouldn't be, but then Tuesdays would become the Mondays.
Yeah, I think I'd take Fridays. Get your work in fast.
What about Mondays?
Be done with it.
We're just fantasizing
I would
about
take
something
Wednesday.
that's never gonna. You want the Wednesday?
Just so you never.
You guys take the Monday and the Friday. I'll take the Wednesday.
All right, we can work that.
There's your deal.
I understand the Wednesday because then you feel like you don't kill yourself out.
Also, I have children that have to go to school, so there's nothing I can do on Monday. Or I can't go somewhere.
No, it's not. But you can get stuff done. The idea of a day off is to get stuff done.
I just want to sleep. Really got nothing to do with anything other.
All right.
Than that.
Okay.
All right. Fantasy's over.
Cheese will be next.
Coming up on Squawk Pod, a very wide-ranging conversation with Palantir co-founder Joe Lonsdale, a venture capitalist and a Musk friend, on what this bid for OpenAI is all about.
I think the mission was it's supposed to be open, and it's not, but yet it has done amazing things for the world. And listen, if Elon were to be able to buy it, I think it'd be a great thing for the world.
And why Lonsdale is bullish on DOGE, the agency, not the coin. There may be mistakes along the way, but he argues a mess is messy to fix.
But I think the good stuff will get turned back on, but there's a lot that needs to be turned off first.
Plus, a debate on carried interest. It's all right after this break. This is Squawk Pod with Joe Kernen, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin.
During a press conference inside the Oval Office on Tuesday with President Trump, Elon Musk defended DOGE.
What meaning does democracy actually have? If the people cannot vote and have their will be decided by their elected representatives in the form of the president and the Senate and the House, then we don't live in a democracy. We live in a bureaucracy. So it's incredibly important that we close that feedback loop, we fix that feedback loop, and that the public's elected representatives, the president, the House, and the Senate, decide what happens, as opposed to a large, unelected bureaucracy.
Joining us right now is Joe Lonsdale, 8VC founding partner, co-founder of Palantir. There's about 100 things that we want to talk about, Joe, including DOGE, including OpenAI, and yes, carried interest, given our conversation on X over the weekend about that. But let me start on the OpenAI Musk front, if you will, because I know that you're a backer of his proposal, or maybe we should call it a hostile bid for OpenAI, which is a not-for-profit. Tell us how it came about. What's your involvement in it? I think we're all trying to understand what's really going on there.
Good morning, Andrew. Well, listen, it's been a really fun 20 days, right? I think this administration, with Elon's help and with President Trump in charge, is winning more than we've ever seen before in 30 years. We've done what we haven't. We couldn't do this much in the last few generations. And for me, I just think this is such a cool time for our civilization. I'm really bullish on what Elon's doing. And listen, I know both Elon and Sam, and Elon really helped create OpenAI. What Sam's done with it's amazing. If Elon wants to do something, I'm gonna support him, though.
Just from a legal perspective, I spent the past 48 hours trying to look through what's happening here. It feels like, just so we're on the same page, that the bid itself, dead on arrival insofar as the board of OpenAI, which is a not-for-profit, given its current structure at least, has actually zero obligation, fiduciary duty, if you will, to return to the investors who've invested in the subsidiary. So just because there's a bid doesn't mean that it has to be taken or even taken seriously, because the only duty they have is to the, quote, mission of the not-for-profit charter, which then raises all sorts of questions about, what the bid is really all about. A lot of speculation that really what it is an effort to try to create a floor or a valuation metric, which would make it tougher, frankly, for OpenAI to become a for-profit, because some of the AGs could get involved and start to look at, what's called fair value, and they might look at the bid as a potential metric to sort of set against. Do you feel like, can you just speak to what's happening here? Because I think everybody who's looking at it just on its face says it can't really be what it is.
Well, listen, this is obviously a sensitive legal situation, Andrew, and I'm not the spokesperson for what's going on, so I want to be really careful what I say. What I will tell you is that, Elon really helped create OpenAI, helped create the mission at the very beginning, probably wouldn't exist without him. And, I think the mission was that it's supposed to be open, and it's not, but yet it has done amazing things for the world. And listen, if Elon were to be able to buy it, I think it'd be a great thing for the world. Some people disagree, but he's making a serious bid. And when my friend, who I think is right now the most important person in the world, wants to do something, I gotta support him.
Let's talk about DOGE. I think there's a lot of people that are super excited about trying to get to the bottom of and find all sorts of things in the government that maybe we shouldn't be spending our money on. That's the one side of it. And then obviously you've seen some of the Treasury secretaries and others, write public letters in the New York Times and elsewhere, frustrated and concerned about what they would say is the transparency of the process, not about the good news of the transparency of what we may learn, but how this is all being done. What do you think about that?
Well, what I think is that, like I said, in 20 days, we've done what we couldn't do in multiple generations. We had this permanent bureaucracy, Andrew, and it's just shocking what they're uncovering. Like, I knew there was waste. I'm one of the only guys who've been speaking out very boldly the last 10 years about how badly this needs to be cut, how badly we need to get into these things. There's even more waste than even I thought, and I was probably on the most extreme side of people saying this is ridiculous and broken, right? So, it's just amazing what they're uncovering everywhere they go here. I think they are being quite transparent about the things they're finding. I think a lot more will continue to come out. But what we know is not being transparent is the mainstream media right now is not being transparent about how ludicrous these things that they're finding, because it's afraid to offend its readers and its listeners on the left overall. We're living in different realities in our country right now, because one side's reporting, hundreds of crazy things. There's all these scams around the world. There's all this money clearly being wasted. There's all this grift being stolen. There's money going to, frankly, to media as well, as you've seen, which is really crazy. And the other side is just not even reporting on the things that are being found. So, in general, I think this is amazing what they're doing. I think they should keep doing it really boldly. The executive order yesterday, 4 employees out for every employee in, they're going to make it more efficient. It's very clear these employees are not working efficiently. I mean, this is awesome stuff. And what's happening, Elon made a great point. I was involved as a kid at PayPal a little bit. Whenever you'd turn off fraud or grift, or change something, the people who would scream the most were the fraudsters, and so the noise is mostly now coming from.
Can I think I'm gonna. I hope you will think I'm coming to this from a place. I know you're gonna say mainstream media, but I hope you'll. I think that a lot of the grift, terrible. I'm very supportive of the idea of trying to expose all of the grift. I think we've been reporting on it quite regularly, actually. I think that the question. And I think we should continue to support trying to find as much grift as possible. At the same time, I would think for the purposes of exposing that grift and making it all work as a country, you want the process to be as credible as possible. So to the extent that there are people who say to themselves, not about whether they're worried about what the fraud is or not, but to say, are these things going, is this data being used in some way we don't know? Is it going into an AI system that we don't know about? Are the people who are finding the grift government employees? Have they been vetted? I mean, isn't it best? Couldn't you walk and chew gum at the same time? Meaning, get all of the grift, expose all of it in the best way possible, and have the process be so credible that everybody says, "Oh my goodness."
Never. You could never have everyone say that.
That's what I'm asking Joe.
Joe's right. They're going to be angry. But listen, Andrew, I mean, what we had to do here is that there's been layers of bureaucracy. Like I have mentors in the Reagan administration who came in looking for these things, and those people were not technical. And so when they went to the bureaucracy and they asked questions, there's so many ways of obscuring and blocking and deterring. And so what Elon did is he got root access and he went to the tech systems themselves. No one has done this in ever. Like no president ever has had tech people around him. And they went to the systems and they started finding things like, oh my goodness. And these people who work for the agencies try to confront them and say, no, you can't look at the systems. You can't. You're getting around all of our ability to block all this stuff. We thought you'd never actually get to see any of this. And they're freaking out because they're looking. And so it's very transparent. They went to the systems. They actually saw the payments. And the payments were going out to crazy shit. There were payments to people with same social security numbers. There are payments to people with no social security numbers to 100 billion. There's it's everywhere. There's payments to Internews Network, which is training media all around the world how to have a certain point of view. That's a very left point of view. There are payments to protesters around the world. There's all this stuff that's crazy, and they're being very transparent. Yes, we went to the data and we found it. It's only been 20 days. Give them a chance. They're gonna put all of this out. They already are putting a lot out. I mean, I think this is amazing, but people want to slow them down. They want to slow them down from stopping their grift is really the biggest question here.
Hey, Joe, I am all in favor of stopping all of those things that you just listed. My concern comes in with the idea of freezing payments, let's say to the NIH, to cancer payments, some of the legitimate aid that was going out through USAID to help starving kids in Africa or some of those things. I'd love to go after the grift and the fraud and the crazy wasteful things that you just laid out without freezing everything and assuming that everything is guilty until proven innocent with some of these issues. There are legitimate expenditures.
I think the NIH thing you're seeing is that we're changing the overhead to 15%, as opposed to, if you and I were going to start something for cancer research for our family, we'd give them the money and say you can use a little bit for overhead.
Right, 15 or 20% is what they would take off.
But it used to be 60, 70%.
And I don't have a problem with that, but we're talking about some stuff that was already promised from last October with the fiscal year and different things. I get changing things going forward. I think retroactively changing things is a little more complicated. Makes perfect sense to lay that out. And in the meantime, there are freezes and serious questions at universities and at research institutes about what they can and can't do. And it's creating a backlog for stuff in some cases, again, where people are going into trials thinking that this is their last try. I mean, that to me, Joe, I get it, and I understand getting to 15 or 20% because that is what private donors pay. Understand all of those things. It's just the chaos that ensues in the meantime around stuff that is very legitimate.
I think the legitimate stuff needs to be turned back on. I think you'd be surprised how much is actually not legitimate and how much was actually being wasted. And I think there's going to be a lot of yelling, pretending things are legitimate that actually weren't. But you listen, my friends work with the Bush administration, and they saved millions of lives in Africa. I do think Africa can now pay for more of this themselves. South Africa is spending money, suing Israel, is spending money, supporting political parties, calling for the death for white people. Maybe they should redirect that money to pay for their own clinics. And so in some of these cases, we shouldn't be paying for them anymore. But I agree with you. There were some very good things that went on too. I think the good stuff will get turned back on, but there's a lot that needs to be turned off first.
Do you think, Joe, one just related thing, do you think just in the whole process that there should be either not more sensitivity, but to be more careful? We were talking earlier about this comment that Elon had tweeted out about the $50 million of condoms that was originally sent.
It said they were for Gaza. Turns out there's a Gaza in another part of Africa, Andrew. It's still probably too many condoms.
And I get it.
But,
and the reason I mention this, though, is, I remember when that tweet went out, it went out everywhere. I remember reading about it. Everyone was reading about it, talking about it, saying this is crazy. There were people talking about, is this an effort to control population growth among Palestinians? I mean, it turned into this sort of wild conversation. And then we realized after the fact that it's not accurate. And of course, most people are never going to realize it wasn't accurate. I mean, maybe they will now because we're talking about it, and it was in the Oval Office.
Listen, there was also public health stuff going to Gaza that was ridiculous. This is obviously silly that we're
by the way,
paying for
I'm not suggesting
that
I'm not suggesting the underlying question about whether we should be spending $50 million on condoms in Mozambique or in Gaza. Gaza is the right thing. That's not. But I'm.
The substance is. Why worry about on the edges? That's
why
not the
worry?
First, yeah, that's not the first thing I think of.
You want
first
to get
thing I think
right.
of is, wow, there's a lot of grift. This is ridiculous. Shouldn't be happening. And there'll be some mistakes, as Elon said yesterday. But that's not what I focus on. Is just talk about throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
No, but
that's what you come away with. That it was.
I just think there's a question about how careful either Elon or others need to be. Given the
slash and burn a lot of this stuff.
And we've been careful for 50 years, right? We've been. You have a bunch of white flag Republicans. You have a bunch of people on the left making money off of it. People on the right making money off of it too. Everyone wants to be careful and keep it going. You're not going to get perfect answers in life. I think this is by far the best thing for our civilization is to very boldly confront this. And this is more, I guess, of a tech world way than a DC way. You're probably right that there are going to be some things need to be turned back on. There's going to be some things that were mislabeled that no one knew what they were. But it's a mess. And so it's a mess, and it's such a mess that I think being bold is the right answer. I get it's going to have a few mistakes, but I'd rather have those few mistakes and fix it.
And I think, look, part of this may be very deliberate because part of the Washington grinding machine is, don't worry, we will survive this too. We'll live through this because the Washington grinding machine always slows everything to a complete stop and nothing gets done. I think that my guess is that this was a pretty deliberate attempt or a pretty deliberate decision to do it this way just to make sure that you actually make some progress.
Being careful and slow isn't how we get to Mars. So, it is what it is.
Joe,
I mean, the deep state's still going to win, no matter how. Don't you think, Joe? Despite the best.
I think they've met their match.
Maybe they met their match,
they're going to win, but I think they met their match.
But you can't. I just don't think you can possibly go too hard.
We were going to talk, and I still want to talk about carried interest. That's why we originally had this debate.
Yeah.
Make your case, because a lot of people, you said it online, even in your business, don't like to come out publicly in favor of carried interest, or at least to speak, vociferously about it. You think it is a very important tax treatment for your industry. So the floor is yours. Make the case, and we can talk about it.
Listen, I think President Trump is winning every day right now. I'm a huge fan. Tax policy is a great way to use, like you said, to piss everyone off of me. But listen, there's a couple of things I'm thinking of changing. The biggest one is the state and local tax deduction. That's $1 trillion question. The carried interest one is like a $10 billion question versus $1 trillion question. So it's a very small amount of tax. And what people are saying is that it's unfair that we get long-term capital gains treatment. Now, I'll tell you, the reason America has long-term capital gains treatment in general is not because of a fairness issue. If it was about fairness, let's give more money to middle class and the working class. I'm 100% aligned. President Trump's going to do that with tips and et cetera. The reason we have long-term capital gains as a framework is it unlocks capital freeze problems. And so when you are, I'm going to be fine no matter what. But when other people who are managing money, like in venture capital or in long-term private equity, when they have a win, they've been building the company over multiple years, then they get this share as a percent of their carry. So just like the founders, just like the employees, just like the investors, they get those shares. And if you have a 23% rate, it's a much more likely they'll reallocate the money than if you give a 60% tax hike and have a 37% rate, which is what some people are talking about. And so that's the same reason we have long-term capital gains in general. You don't want to do capital freeze. It'd be crazy to do a 60% capital gains effectively tax hike on these people who own shares, who are the innovators in our economy, right when, as JD's talking about, AI is going to make us more prosperous. It's going to be really good for our country. We want to reallocate to new projects.
Okay, Joe, here's where I'm going to come on the other side of this. Capital gains was built to incentivize, as I think it should, more investment in America. We are trying to get Americans to invest their own capital, not other people's capital, but their own capital, and we give a better tax treatment for that. Ordinary income is for your labor. Everybody's labor, I believe, is the labor. I don't believe there's a special form of labor for one particular class over somebody else, which is, by the way, what carried interest at this particular moment is. As for incentives, to me, assuming that you and everybody in the private equity and venture capital business actually are committed to your own fiduciary duty for your investors whose capital you're allocating, it shouldn't matter what the tax rate is for you personally, because the argument should be that you would be making those investments, buying and selling assets based on your fiduciary duty to those whom you represent.
You're missing something there, Andrew. When we have a big win, what happens is you distribute the shares for almost always in the biggest wins, and so you end up with shares actually, and it's not. And you've been both a new tax and old tax. You don't get taxing on those shares right away. You end up with those shares. Now the question is, when you sell those shares, are you going to get the 23 or the 37%? The reason it's 23 is because you might own those shares another 5 years, and then you pay when you sell. That's how it always works now. It's how it's going to work even under the new code. And so that's really important. It's like you're owning this thing you've been working on. You want to have the capital gains tax be the same reallocation incentive. I'm talking about system incentives here now. Totally agree with you. Tax rich people more. Stop letting them take money offshore for reinsurance scams and hedge funds. There's so many ways that we should tax rich people more. But the incentives are long term when we get shares for having built something.
Well, with the exception of founder shares, I was going to say most employees don't even get this benefit, which is to say, if you have RSUs or in most cases most options, there are certain kinds of options, but that's limited at $100,000. Even those folks are not getting the benefit. So to the extent that the venture community or the private equity community says, well, look, it's like we're an employee of the company. We're giving our sweat equity. Every employee in America is giving their sweat equities to all sorts of businesses. That's what they're doing. And they pay ordinary income on their sweat equity. If you put money into the company, and if you do, which I know you do, that portion of your of the capital obviously should get paid at a capital gains rate. But I'm not sure why this particular construct is the one construct in the entire universe where effectively the sweat equity should be paid at a different rate.
Well, I've helped thousands of employees who work for me buy in their options and get long-term capital gains, and so there are thousands to do that. You're right. Later stage in the company, it's harder. But look at the system incentives. We're arguing about $10 billion here at most over 10 years. I think the bigger thing that'll piss all your viewers off is the state and local tax deductions. It's $1.3 trillion. I don't think they should get that back in New York and California. But now my partners in California will be angry at me.
Joe Lonsdale, we love the conversation always. We deeply appreciate it, and we love doing it here on TV, and I enjoy doing it on social media and else. So thank you. Good to see you, sir.
Next on Squawk Pod, U.S. drivers may be hitting a fork in the road when it comes to SUVs and trucks. Our Phil LeBeau breaks it down.
Americans have always liked big automobiles. That's why SUVs and crossovers are so popular.
You're listening to Squawk Pod from CNBC. Here's Andrew.
You're watching Squawk Box on CNBC. I'm Andrew Ross Sorkin, along with Joe Kernen and Becky Quick. Got a whole bunch of big stories to tell you about this morning. It's a fire hose of news.
There's a growing debate, it says here, in the auto industry. Has the nation hit peak truck and SUV demand, and are sedans making a comeback, which I would not have thought? Phil LeBeau, you got to talk me into this. He joins us now with more. I wouldn't even know what sedan.
I don't think I can, Joe.
You can't talk me into it.
I wouldn't
no.
say they're making a comeback, but the Dave Canton Group, which specializes in M&A within the auto industry, they put this idea out a couple of weeks ago, and it sparked some debate within the industry. Are we at peak truck? And by that, the claim that some are making is that we're not going to sell any more SUVs and crossovers market share-wise than what we do right now. Cox Automotive ran the market share for SUVs versus cars going all the way back to 2012. You don't have to be a rocket science to figure this out, that when you're looking at the market right now, cars and they're just not popular. They're just not offered very much. And that's part of the reason here. Yes, you can still buy a car right now, but for the most part, that market is dominated by the Asian automakers. They offer more sedans, far more sedans than the big three, who essentially have gotten out of that business. Yes, they offer a few niche models within that. Think about the Mustang, think about the Corvette. But otherwise, you just want a run-of-the-mill sedan, you're just not going to find it out there. The question is whether or not peak SUV is because we are seeing prices tickling $50,000 on average in terms of what people are paying. J.D. Power ran some numbers for us. Look at the growth in average transaction prices going back to 2015 compared to now. The average pickup truck, more than $54,000, and there you see the average SUV, more than $43,000. So again, as you take a look at the Asian auto stocks, they've benefited from this, because they realize that not everybody wants a crossover or an SUV in the United States. A lot do, but there are also a number of people who want a Camry or a Civic. And as a result, they've played to that market. Quickly take a look at the big three, so to speak, GM, Ford, Stellantis. The story with these guys right now is trying to navigate what's happening with the potential of tariffs and also steel tariffs that are going into effect right now. You heard Jim Farley yesterday saying this is creating chaos for the automakers as they try to navigate what the Trump administration may or may not do and how this impacts their costs at the end of the day.
Can you even buy a Dodge, like muscle car? I don't even, they don't even have
You're looking for a Dodge Dart?
Like a muscle, a Dodge Challenger or something, I don't know. But you know, Phil,
You
it
can
used to
get a
be.
Challenger, yeah.
You can, but it used to
Yes.
be the Honda Accord. Everybody had a Honda Accord, and you could see
Right.
even.
I did.
Then there's a lot of Mercedes, though. A lot of if you're somewhat, I guess, for the wealthy, if you want a sedan, you buy like a Mercedes sedan. And you know what else? Teslas, sedans, Tesla sedans. 6 of them pass me. I go anywhere, and I see Tesla.
Right, but what is, and then you look at their most popular model that is out there right now. It's the Model Y, which is not a car. That's really more of a crossover utility vehicle.
Or a crossover. But
cost is a limiting factor, or if you're driving or parking in a city. I mean, you pay an extra $30 at any of the garages if you're driving a car that's not a sedan.
Yes.
Might not even be able to. And even
But
parking
guys, at the end of the
spaces-
day, Americans, Americans have always liked big automobiles. That's why SUVs and crossovers are so popular. We are big people who want big automobiles, generally speaking, in this country.
Especially if you have a bunch of kids. It's impossible not to have either a minivan or an SUV. And the other thing I'll say is once you go to an SUV or a crossover or a minivan, you don't want to go back because it's nice to be up high. You feel safer in it. And if you're worried about somebody else hitting you on the highways, if they're all in big cars, you need to be in a big car too.
And there's fewer selections out there if you're looking for a sedan. Having said that, there are some who are now saying, come on, are we going to see any greater market share gains within the SUV and crossover segment, or is this pretty much it? You put them and pickups together, you're at 82%. Will we see it grow from there? Maybe not.
What's is like a 911 a sedan? That's a sports car. Is that a totally different classification? So what is that?
No, we're just talking
You're in a
cars.
sedan.
Just
Am
the
I in a
segment
sedan?
cars.
Huh? That's a car. Okay.
I wouldn't call it a sedan.
You're in a sedan.
I'm in a sedan. Well, you're in a minivan.
I am in a minivan. I don't care.
All right. Thanks, Phil.
It bothers you. It doesn't bother me.
Minivans bother me. Great.
Sedan. You're in a sedan.
That's the podcast for today. Thank you for tuning in. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernen, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin for 3 hours every weekday morning, starting at 6 a.m. You can get the smartest takes and analysis from that TV show right here, as long as you follow us on Squawk Pod. We'll meet you right back here tomorrow. Have a great day.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.